Deeper now. Tara Palmieri from Puck News. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
What jumps out at you? You've had a chance to look at these polls. Which party's happier with where things stand right now?
It's an interesting question. I look at Pennsylvania and you see the race tightening, right? Fetterman had double-digit lead over the summer. And I have to look at the numbers that are being spent from independent expenditures, specifically from the Republicans. I think it's been like $60 million almost hit at John Fetterman. By the end of this week, they will have spent $100 million outside groups in Pennsylvania's Senate race alone. So I think that's a big reason why you're seeing these numbers start to tighten. I do wonder how this will all shake out because Josh Shapiro is the Democratic candidate. He is polling for governor in Pennsylvania. He is polling double digits ahead of Doug Mastriano. He is a Democrat. Could he help Fetterman along in a race that's really starting to tight? Or are we going to see ticket splitters, people who vote for, a Democratic governor and then a Republican senator being Dr. Oz? So we're going to have to see what happens in that case. And the same thing in Wisconsin, the amount of outside spending that is going into these races, I think that's why you're seeing them tighten up. Mitch McConnell has his eyes on Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, and that Senate Leadership Fund is spending hundreds of millions of dollars on these races.
Look, money matters. Issues matter, too, Basil. And if you look at the ranking, Basil Smykel, very nice to see you, by the way, and you look at the issues, and we had them up on the screen before, the economy and inflation, clearly the most important issue. That's in the mid-40s in both of these key states. And then way down below that, abortion and also election integrity and voting rights here. So what does that tell you?
Well, we can go to the issue about ticket splitting because I think that's really important. You may see a lot of voters, particularly Democratic voters, that say we want to make sure that Democrats control the Senate because of Lindsey Graham's, a bill on nationalizing abortion restrictions, for example, but may vote for the Republican for governor. So that ticket splitting is something I'm certainly looking at around a lot of these issues like inflation, but also abortion, reproductive rights. But I also think what Bernie Sanders was saying is really critical as well, because Democrats know how to talk about these issues. We won in the suburbs over the last couple of cycles. So Democrats clearly have the talking points to talk to those voters. But, the word that was in our lexicon in 2016 that we've purged, which is pivot, that actual function still needs to exist. And while the Democrats were really good at putting threats to democracy out there, and it was polling very well in the sort of the early fall, we needed to turn the table and start talking about inflation, crime, for example, gas prices, all of those economic issues, which we have in our quiver. We just probably didn't do quickly enough, but there's still time.
So you think pivot to the economy, yes?
Absolutely, because if you're motivated for reproductive rights, if you're motivated because you are concerned about threats to democracy, that's already built in. So let's start talking about other things, which we do have in our vocabulary.
It's funny you should say that because President Joe Biden, who is the top Democrat in the country, seems to be doing that. Charlie Dan, I want you to listen to this and how he is now leaning into the economy with this very specific language. This was the president to the DNC today.
Democrats are building a better America for everyone, with an economy that grows from the bottom up and the middle out, where everyone does well. Republicans are doubling down on their MAGA trickle-down economics that benefits the very wealthy, failed the country before, and will fail it again if they win.
MAGA trickle down. Charlie, how will that work?
I don't think it's going to help Joe Biden very much. The mood is clearly moving toward the Republicans. The Democrats are playing defense in Oregon and Rhode Island and Nevada and a number of places. Inflation and the economy are driving everything. It seems to me right now that I think the Democrats are in this very defensive position on the economy because they are being hit with some justification about some of the spending on the American Rescue Plan that overspent and juiced demand even more, helping to contribute to inflation. So I think they're in a defensive position, and people are feeling it. And wherever you are, it's not just the economy. I like to follow up on the crime issue in Philadelphia. This is a huge issue. It's an enormous issue that people are talking about. And they're not just talking to people in Philadelphia, but people in that whole media market who are paying close attention. So I'm not sure what Biden said today is really going to do much to help them.
Is there anything that Democrats or Biden could say about the economy that would scare you as a Republican?
Well, I mean, it seems like right now, let's take the student loan bill that they're talking about. That could be $500 billion. Well, that's going to actually juice inflation, according to the economists, too, because, again, they're going to juice demand. I mean, that's a solution to a problem from their perspective, but that's not going to help on the inflation matter. I mean, I could point at a number of things that they've been proposing, that even their Inflation Reduction Act really has very little to do with inflation. It was a price control bill on drugs and climate change, but it really didn't deal with inflation.
So 7.3 million early ballots already cast. That's a lot.
Right.
7.3 million people have already voted in this election. Again, the number is up from 4 years ago. But also, we're seeing this video of voter intimidation, what looks like voter intimidation in Arizona. How do you think that's going to play out?
Well, high turnout is generally good for Democrats, right? And it does seem that people are starting to embrace the COVID changes that we've seen, the ability to vote early, the mail in your ballots, not feeling like you're an absentee voter, just to vote early. And maybe, you know, people have changed in their style of voting. At the same time, this change has caused a lot of unrest and has used some politicians to try to create a sense of fear that the change means that you can't trust the ballots and you can't trust the results. And that's why you're seeing this intimidation. You see poll workers, they don't even want to work in polls anymore because they don't want to work there because they're afraid of being harassed. And people don't want to vote. I mean, it's a really terrifying thing. And I think the anxiety around the change is being exploited.
Look, and you can see it working in the poll numbers right now, some stunning numbers within these polls. When you ask among likely Pennsylvania voters, 70% say they're somewhat confident, very or somewhat confident that their vote will be cast and counted as they intended, but only 46% of Republicans say they're confident that their vote will be counted carefully. In Wisconsin, it's 51% of Republicans. In Michigan, it's 41%. Charlie, Republicans don't believe in elections.
Well, look, I would tell anybody in Pennsylvania that we know how to run elections in Pennsylvania. We're very good at it. They are generally very fair, and they're pretty transparent. And so I think that's totally misguided for people to think it's not going to be. Our problem in this country, frankly, is what happens after the election. That's what we witnessed in 2020. And, you know, I hear all this stuff about, Republicans not liking mail-in votes. Well, here's my absentee ballot application that I received from the Republican State Committee to vote by absentee. I've already voted by absentee. You know, but Republicans were always very good at this. And because of Donald Trump, he told Republicans not to vote by mail, even though in Pennsylvania, we were better at it than the Democrats.
One other thing that may not be helping is the way that some politicians talk about the last election. Ted Cruz was on The View today and pressed repeatedly about whether Joe Biden won the 2020 election, which he did. And you can watch some of that here. Listen.
Listen, Biden is the president today. There's a lot of folks in the media that anytime... Hold on. I'm answering exactly that question. Okay. There are a lot of folks in the media that try to, anytime a Republican is in front of a TV camera, try to say the election was fair and square and legitimate. You know who y'all don't do that to? You don't do it to Hillary Clinton, who stood up and said Trump stole the election.
They didn't storm the Capitol. They didn't try to kill my former
Abrams, who said that the election was stolen. They sat here and said it was illegitimate, and you guys were fine with it.
What's he trying to do there?
Yeah, I don't know. Listen, you know, as much as he could try to sort of step away from what was called the big lie, I like to call it the big conspiracy. Why? Because there's so many people around the country that have spent a lot of money, put a lot of resources into, and through talking points in front of a lot of candidates to do exactly what I was saying, drive fear in the minds of a lot of voters about the outcomes of elections. That fear is what's driving so much of what we're seeing on the right. When you layer that with the conversations around crime, as you were talking about, which is consistently being racialized and urbanized, that fear is one of the biggest drivers for the right. And that's what Democrats have to contend with in this cycle.
All right, friends, great to see you. 15 days left.
That's right. Go Phillies.